Okay, so when you're first starting out in guitar, it can be extremely overwhelming. There's so many different things to learn and figure out and master, and quite frankly, you're going to spend the rest of your life as a guitar player learning new things. But no matter your interests or reason for getting into the guitar or style of music you might be wanting to play, I think there are 5 things that every beginner guitarist should learn. So in today's video, we're going to talk about that. The 5 things every beginner guitarist should learn when they're first starting out. Now, these 5 things will work no matter what type of guitar you're playing, what genres of music you might be into, and what your goals are as a new guitarist. These are 5 things that work across the board for all guitar players. So without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at the first thing to learn. Now, there's a few common things that I used to see all the time when I was teaching guitar lessons for a living. First among them was how guitar players would hold their pick and move their right hand when strumming. I would see people strumming like this, as if your wrist doesn't move at all, and all of the strumming action comes from this sort of elbow hinge. When in reality, we want our wrists to be nice and loose. You want most of the strumming motion to come from your wrist. I used to tell students, imagine that you're shaking water off of your hand in the sink after washing them. When my wrist is straight like that, I have almost no control over where my pick is hitting the strings and how hard my pick is hitting the strings. Listen to how it sounds if I loosen up my wrist, though. Keeping your wrist loose will also help you progress to more difficult strumming patterns faster. I can go from this to that much easier. Another thing to work on when you're learning strumming patterns is being able to easily target different strings. So again, if I go to my E major chord here, you're going to hear me pick the low string, the 6th string, which is the E, or the root of the chord, and the upper strings, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd strings separately. Being able to target different strings while you're strumming is crucial to certain strumming patterns like this. Now, to practice this, pick any chord that you can hold comfortably for a certain amount of time and sit and just play downstrokes. But what I want you to do is target the bottom 3 strings and the top 3 strings separately. You should start to feel where your wrist needs to be and where your hand positioning needs to be in order to target those 2 separate groups of strings. Then take a simple strumming pattern that you might already be familiar with and try targeting the different groups of strings. Just remember, good strumming technique and rhythm is something that is crucial to being a good guitar player. The next thing to focus on is your left hand position on the neck of the guitar. Now, this is something that is slightly subjective because everyone has slightly different hands. So keep in mind that how you play the guitar is unique to you, and it's part of your sound that you will develop as you progress in your time as a guitar player. Where you place your thumb on the back of the neck, how your fingers interact with the strings on the frets, all lend themselves to developing your own sound. But with that said, there's a few common hand placement techniques that work well for different styles of playing. First, let's look at playing some chords. I'm just going to play a D major, C add 9, and a G major. Pretty simple open cowboy chords. Now, pay attention to where my thumb sits when I'm playing these chords. Notice how it's wrapped over the top of the guitar, and that is what's most comfortable for me when playing these chord voicings. The reason is I let the neck rest in the palm of my hand, and I use that as leverage to actually press down with my fingertips on the strings to fret the notes. It also helps me get in position to where the tips of my fingers are actually pressing down on the strings. One common thing a lot of beginners have trouble with is actually getting all of the strings to ring out when playing a chord. You probably have chords that sound something like this. Part of what will prevent that is actually getting your fingertips on the string instead of the flatter part of the pad of your finger. So in order to do that, I need to wrap my hand around the bottom of the neck in order to get my fingers in position. And for me, the easiest way to do that is to put my thumb over the top of the neck, allowing the back of the neck of the guitar to sit right here in the palm of my hand. Now, placing the thumb over the top of the neck doesn't work for everything. Bar chords, for example. If I tried to play this G major chord with my thumb over the top of the neck, I can't get my first finger in the right position to actually bar all 6 strings. So what I need to do there is actually put my thumb on the back of the neck right behind my first finger, essentially making a pinching motion like this. Think of it like a crab claw, if you will. Keeping your thumb on the back of the neck is also good for playing single notes, letting each note ring out clearly with no fretting out or buzzing. Now, as you progress, you're going to find yourself switching between different hand positions all the time while you're playing. If I take this song, for example, one of my favorite songs to play on acoustic, you can see I start with the thumb over the top of the neck, but then there's a second part of the song that goes like this, where I'm switching from thumb on the back of the neck to thumb over the top. Now, this is going to be pretty difficult at first, and that's okay. This takes time to develop, and it's really about developing muscle memory. The more you do this, the more your hands will just instinctively fall into place on the neck where they're used to being. So take your time and find the hand positions that are the most comfortable and most effective for you. Now, the next thing to work on as a beginner is palm muting and controlling your dynamics with your right hand. Now, we talked about this a little bit in strumming, but this takes it a step further. Basically, palm muting is using the fleshy, sort of fat part of my hand right here to rest against the strings right where they come over the saddle to essentially mute the guitar. Now, palm muting, like I just did, is relatively easy. I'm just going to take a power chord right here. This is a D power chord, so 5th string 5th fret and 4th string 7th fret, those 2 notes, and that gives me a power chord, D power chord. But instead of leaving my hand in open air above the top of the guitar, I'm actually going to rest my hand right here on the bridge. And I want to put this part of my hand right where the strings break over the saddle on the bridge. That's going to give me this sound. A nice muted sound. And I can actually make it more or less muted depending on how far forward or how far back I have my hand placed. So that's where I was before. Now I'm going to slide forward towards the neck. Now we're totally muted. You can't even hear the chord that I'm playing. All you hear is the string noise. Now if I go back, now I'm not muting at all. So you can actually fine tune how much muting is going on depending on where your hand is on the bridge itself. So one of my favorite strumming techniques is to actually mute and strum at the same time. Essentially, all I'm doing is taking that same part of the hand we were just palm muting with and kind of striking the bridge as I'm playing. Just doing that. And you can hear on an acoustic, it actually gives you a nice sort of low end thud as well. Now when I bring the pick into the equation, which I've got between my first finger and my thumb right here, we get this. Then after you master that, practice muting and playing open to get different rhythms. So like the other suggestions on this list, start slow and work your way up. This is about developing muscle memory in your right hand, finding that position that works for you and training your hand to go there on command. Next up, restringing your guitar. Now this is something that you're going to be doing hundreds, if not thousands of times over your years as a guitar player. And the more guitars you get, the more guitars you're going to have to restring. So this is something that's worth learning how to do properly early on in your time as a guitar player. Now there are plenty of different ways to restring a guitar, and depending on what type of guitar you have, some of them may work better than others. I'm going to restring this acoustic today. This was actually my first sort of real guitar I got when I was about 15 years old. I spent the summer doing yard work for my parents and my neighbors and saved up enough money to get my hands on this Taylor 110 and played the crap out of it for years, as you can see by the shape of the top. Now there's a few basic things you're going to need to make your life easier when restringing your guitars. First off is a string winder. Now these come in all different varieties and shapes and sizes. I'll have a few of my favorites linked down below in the description box if you want to pick one up. But something that winds the strings, cuts the strings, and pulls bridge pins out if you have an acoustic guitar is really useful. I also like these little neck stands here. They're really cheap, but they make your life so much easier when restringing a guitar because you can set it on a tabletop and it holds your guitar nice and steady. And then finally, you're going to need some strings. Now, what type of strings and what gauge of strings you use is completely up to you. Gauge meaning how thick the strings are. And if you've had your guitar set up for a specific gauge of string, you might want to stick with that gauge. Or if you are going to switch, just go one size up or one size down. But you want to avoid massive jumps in string gauge. So the first thing we're going to do is take the old strings off the guitar. And it's as simple as unwinding the strings from the peg head to get the tension off of each one. Now you really only have to do a couple of winds here to get the strings nice and loose. Then I'm going to take the string clipper attachment and about halfway down the string, just clip it off. Once that's done, unwrap them at the peg head. And I like to take my excess dead strings and wrap them up. So just make a loop and take the tag in and wrap it around a couple times. This makes them way easier to manage and throw away. Now, since this is an acoustic, I need to pull the bridge pins out. And luckily, this multi-tool has a bridge pin puller here on the end. So I'm just going to be careful, slide the puller underneath the bridge pin and gently pull up to get the rest of the string out of the body. And now with all the strings off, it's a particularly good time to do some basic cleaning and maintenance to your guitar to keep it in good playing shape. First thing I'm going to do is just inspect the frets and make sure they're not too worn out. And I'm also going to take a look at the nut up here, the end of the neck, just making sure it's not chipped or broken anywhere. And then I'm going to clean up the guitar, maybe use a little guitar polish, and I'm going to condition the fretboard using a little lemon oil or fretboard conditioner. Basically, this just keeps some moisture in the wood, which is good for the fretboard, and it helps clean some of the finger gunk off of the fretboard itself as well, which is also good. I'm just going to take a little bit of this fretboard conditioner and dab it on with a microfiber towel. Just work it into the grain of the wood there. And give that a minute to soak in, and then we'll wipe the excess off with the other side of the towel. All right, so now that that's done, I'm going to take out my fresh strings here. And the first thing that I always like to do is start by putting all 6 strings into the bridge in the order that they go in. Now, if you're not sure, most packs will tell you on the back which strings go where. Now, these D'Addario strings are color-coded. If you look at the ball ends where the string mounts into the bridge, each ball end is a different color telling you which string goes where. So as you can see, we got a couple different colors going on there. So place the strings and then take the bridge pins and put those in place. Then once all your strings are in place, it's time to clip them to length and wind them. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up, but I have a trick. See, there needs to be a specific number of wraps on each string post to help keep your guitar in tune while you're playing it. On the wound strings, I typically like to do 3 wraps on the post, and on the non-wound strings, I like to do at least 4 wraps on the post. So what I'm gonna do is take the low string, the 6th string first, and I'm gonna lay it in the nut slot, and I'm gonna measure past its post and go to the next post up and clip the string to length just past that first post. Then we're gonna take it and push it through the post hole, and this is very important. You want all of the strings to wrap inside the headstock. So on a 3-in-3 headstock like this, the top 3 strings are going to wrap this way, and the bottom 3 strings are going to wrap this way. If you had a 6-in-line headstock, like on a Fender, for example, they're all going to wrap this way. So I'm going to place the string through the post hole with just a little bit sticking out on the other end, and then start to wrap. And what I'm doing is using my first finger and my thumb here to hold the string in place, putting some tension on it so it will wrap nice and easily. Now we don't want to get it all the way up to tension yet, just enough tension to hold it in place. Then once you've got all the strings on, it's just a matter of tuning them to pitch. And then once they're all tuned to pitch, I like to play a few chords, some heavy strumming to kind of help the strings stretch out a little bit. Play for a couple minutes, let the strings stretch out, and you're done. And finally, I think every beginner guitarist should be transcribing. Now, transcribing is essentially just a fancy term for learning songs by ear, and you may already be doing this. If you are, good job, keep it up. Now, this is how I started out, and I'm really thankful that I did, because as a result, it's trained me to be able to hear something and play it almost instantly. Not all the time, but more often than not, I can hear something and know where it is on the guitar and be able to pick it out within a few tries. And now, as a professional musician, that's one of the greatest assets I have, is a well-trained ear. The first thing I recommend trying is to just find the root notes of each chord. Just try and pick out the single note that each chord is based around in the song, and take little bites. So maybe only start with the first measure, the first time through the chord progression, and listen to it and stop. Then try and pick out, find where those notes are on the fretboard. Now, it may take you a couple of tries, but eventually you're going to get it, and you're going to be able to tell, oh, that's the note that I'm hearing. Once you've done that and moved through the basic chord progression, and you can play the root notes of each chord, then try and find what type of chord they might be playing. Is it a major chord? Or is it a minor chord? Or is it maybe a dominant chord? Now, when you're starting out, you probably will only be able to find basic chords and chord progressions, and that's okay. But as you progress and you get better at this and your ear gets more comfortable at picking out specific sounds, then you'll be able to find not just what chord they're playing, but where they're playing it, what specific voicing they might be using, or what picking pattern they might be doing. If you're learning a riff, or getting to the point where you're learning how to play solos by ear. Now, the reason I recommend learning this way, and I used to teach all my students this way, is because it's essentially the best bang for your buck in terms of practicing. Not only are you learning a new song and new chords, but you're also training your ear. The more you practice this, hearing a note and then playing it, the better you get at doing it in the future. At the same time, you're learning new songs, which is teaching you new ways of playing the guitar. You're learning new ways to put chords together, or to play single note lines and chords at the same time, or learning new licks and riff ideas or solo ideas. So that's why I recommend every beginner guitarist start to transcribe or learn songs by ear. So those are 5 things to learn as a beginner guitarist. What do you think about this list? Let me know in the comments section down below. You'll also find a link to my tone course down there, which is my first video course I just released a few weeks ago. It's dedicated to teaching you the fundamentals of getting great electric guitar tone, which is good for you beginner to intermediate electric players out there that are starting to work on amps and effects, and maybe putting your first pedal board together. That's linked down below. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and click that bell icon down below as well. I put new videos up every week, as well as do weekly live streams, so clicking that bell will keep you notified as to when I'm putting up new videos. You can also subscribe to my podcast down there as well, and sign up for the green room if you're interested. That's all linked down below. Anyways, I'm Rhett Shull. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and remember, there is no plan B.